So hi everyone, and welcome to our hybrid and remote working webinar. I'm Kelly Chan, Digital Marketing Executive at AbilityNet. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Michael Vermeersch from Microsoft, Katie Coates from the Buisness Disability Forum, and AbilityNet's very own Adam Tweed. In the background, my colleague Freya is also sharing the slide today. So next slide, please, Freya. Before we get started, I just wanted to run through a few bits of housekeeping. We're joined today by My Clear Text, who'll be providing live captions. You can turn on the captions using the CC option on the control panel. Additional captions are also available via StreamText. So streamtext.net/player?event=AbilityNet. And the slides are also available on our website, abilitynet.org.uk/hybrid-work-webinar. If you have any technical issues and you need to leave early, you'll receive an email in a couple of days' time with a recording, transcript and slides. And depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find a Q&A window. If you want to ask our panelists any questions, do drop those into the Q&A area for them to address at the end of today's session. Also, please feel free to leave feedback in the post-webinar survey. So I'll just start with introductions about AbilityNet. So next slide, please, Freya. We're a technology charity that exists to remove barriers to participation for disabled people at work, in education and in day-to-day life. We do this by providing services to individuals, providing recommendations for assistive technology and adaptations to meet their needs. We also offer a wide range of consultancy and training services to organisations, all geared towards offering an inclusive experience. So I'm just going to start a poll. So next slide, please, Freya. Before we begin the webinar content. So if you could tell us, are you and is your workforce primarily working at the office full-time, working from home 4 out of 5 days a week, working from home 3 out of 5 days a week, working from home 2 out of 5 days a week, working from home 1 out of 5 days a week, or working remotely full-time. And there's also an option if you're not sure or you just prefer not to say. So please launch the poll, Freya. Thank you. And we'll just give a moment for everyone to answer. Depending on how you've joined the webinar, you may find you can't find a poll, but you can just leave your answer in the Q&A panel if that's the case. Just give it a few more seconds. Okay, and Freya, when you're ready, if you could just end the poll and share the results. Fab. So I'm just going to read out the poll results. So 4% of you are working at the office full time, 16% are working from home 4 out of 5 days a week. The majority of you, 23%, are working from home 3 out of 5 days a week. 20% are working from home 2 out of 5 days a week, and 5% of you are working from home 1 out of 5 days a week. Sorry, I misspoke. 26% of you are actually working remotely full time. Amazing. Thanks for sharing your experience via this poll. So thank you. That's really useful to gauge the experiences of everyone joining us today. And I'm confident our panel will be able to offer some great insights into accessible hybrid working. So to set the scene for today's webinar, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Adam Tweed. Adam is AbilityNet's senior workplace and education consultant who'll be covering what is hybrid working and what challenges are being faced by disabled employees in a hybrid work environment. So over to you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Hopefully you can all hear me. Fantastic. It was a really interesting poll. I thought I was a little bit surprised that it was the 2s and 3. I thought 2, but 3. I didn't think 3 days a week was going to be the top hitter there. So that was interesting. Thank you. So yes, AbilityNet have a gap analysis service, and although how to do accessible recruitment is perhaps the thing most people are interested in right now, managing hybrid working is definitely a close second and is obviously something impacting business as usual across almost every organization. Pre-pandemic, it was relatively rare to have roles that were hybrid, or at least advertised as such. And this did disadvantage a lot of people, particularly disabled people. In fact, there was a story I remember back from the early days of the pandemic where a disabled woman was rejected for a position as they were office-based. The office that she had applied for was office-based. I remember her interview as she said it was incredibly irritating that 2 weeks later, she read a tweet from exactly the same company championing how quickly, when the pandemic hit, they'd moved to online and business as usual and no disruption to anybody. So yeah, a really frustrating and probably very common story. I don't know what the laws were, or if it was an outright discrimination case that, like many disabled people, she just didn't have the energy to challenge again. I don't know why she didn't challenge it further. But the point was, it was an experience many disabled people have. Suddenly everybody realized, oh, it does. It turns out this is perfectly possible. Now, hybrid, in my opinion, is a very positive move to the best of both worlds, but it does need careful management, and we do need to recognize we're still in a bit of a period of flex. We've gone from the norm of office-based work to the rapid move to everybody online. And now the pendulum is swinging back to, do we need people in the office? Maybe we should have a couple of days back. Or are there things we're unable to do or to achieve remotely? As a result, we have some organizations who are mandating a return. Some are recommending it. Some have teams being asked to return while others don't. And there's a certain sense of the inequity and general bad feeling that this brings. Now, mandating return has led to a certain amount of passive-aggressive pushback for many. Some people deliberately picking quieter times so they can actually get some work done in the office, which again negates the well-being aspect of returning to the office to a certain degree. Next slide, please. Mandating a return to the office really should be around defining what you are seeking to achieve. And so some of the points that I've got here on this slide. So the first one is collaboration. So despite many excellent collaboration tools on platforms such as Teams, obviously with Michael being on the call, we do have to highlight Teams and the collaboration tools within that. We do need to recognize that collaboration is still challenging online. And one of the things we cover in our inclusive meetings and events training is the ways in which you can manage hybrid events to avoid the typical experience where remote participants tend to be the more disadvantaged. Then we've got the water cooler moments. So hybrid doesn't address the loss of these water cooler moments. And what I mean by this, for anybody who's unfamiliar with the phrase, is the kind of serendipitous overhearing of something somebody else is working on that might have a positive impact for something you're doing. So a solution you hadn't considered, or hearing someone talk about something you did 6 months ago and stuck in a drawer that you can now save them time by presenting them with, there you go, you don't need to do that at all. These sorts of things. It's something we haven't cracked. Maybe it's something that Metaverse might assist with if that ever really catches on. Or maybe it's something that the notion of something like an AI co-pilot might take off our hands. Your co-pilot chatting to everybody else's co-pilot and relaying it to you as if it was another colleague in the office. So Kelly was working on something similar 6 months ago. You might want to look at that. Then expectations. So manage expectations. Is the expectation that in a return to the office, you're expecting your team to be carrying out the same tasks at the same level that they would be able to do at home? So are you thinking focus? Or do you accept that the increased likelihood of distraction and a potential drop in productivity is going to be worthwhile for well-being and these water cooler moments that I've just talked about? Then there's the environment. Is the return to the office actually appealing? Are you providing an environment or a vibe that people would want to return to? It's all very well kind of mandating a return to the office, but if you've got a grubby dark room at the back of a building somewhere, you're probably not going to get people leaping at the chance. And then finally, goals, the reason for the return. It's not just about wanting to see people back in the office or using the office space that you're paying for. Are you organising face-to-face meetings, for example, with clear goals in terms of people understanding why they're being called back into a room with others, and that it will be more constructive? And it's these sorts of challenges we'll be discussing today with today's panel. So as Kelly said, today we're joined by two other disability inclusion experts. So without further ado, let's meet the panel. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Katie Coates from the Buisness Disability Forum and Michael Vermish from Microsoft. So we'll go alphabetically. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure, thank you so much. Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm one of the senior business partners at the Buisness Disability Forum. For those that might not know, BDF are a non-profit organisation who provide disability smart solutions to help our members and partners to get disability inclusion right across the board. We provide tailored support that allows us to help our members and partners to successfully attract, recruit, retain and develop disabled and neurodiverse employees. I'm really looking forward to discussing the role that hybrid working, home working plays in disability inclusion in the workplace. So thanks so much for having me. I think hybrid working is often one of the most successful accommodations that organisations can make for their colleagues. I'm almost entirely home-based myself, and it works really, really well for me and what I need from work. And I'm really interested to hear different perspectives on this and hear what other people are doing as well. So thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic, welcome. And Michael.
Hi there, my name is Michael Vermish. So I'm from Microsoft. I'm the accessibility go-to-market manager there. My role is primarily focused on closing the disability divide and a number of levels. 3 pillars there. 1 is to make sure that our products and services are accessible. 2 is skills and awareness. There's still a lot of work to be done in this area. And 3rd is culture in the workplace. We need to look at how we can achieve this. We need to look at what people can bring as talent, as potential, all of that kind of stuff. And that requires that kind of shift in culture in organizations. And that's also a heavy focus for me. That's me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And welcome to you too. So our first question, if we could just go on to that first slide. So the question is, so you've been told that your team need to start going into the office. As a manager, how can I start that conversation? Is it all right to start with you, Katie, on that one, or are you expecting me to go?
That's okay. Fine, no problem. So yeah, if you're going to have a conversation, you have to sort of be prepared for the fact that it might be a really difficult conversation to have. And it might have been a difficult conversation for you to have with kind of your senior leadership. So it's really important to start that conversation with empathy, sensitivity, honesty, open communication. Approach it as a discussion rather than a dictation as to this is how your working environment is going to change. You can start the discussion by talking about the benefits of in-person working and get your employees to say, well, what do you think is good about being in the office and maybe what's not so good? So the positives of in-person working, like Adam discussed before, are like improvements in team dynamics, the discussions and the water cooler moments and the ideas at all stages, and being able to just grab somebody in a quick question and things like that can all add into that social interaction that is really invaluable for some people. It's also really important to be prepared to acknowledge employee concerns and make sure you're fully informed about why the decision's been made. So you need to take time as a manager to ask your senior leadership why that decision's been made and fully understand it yourself so that you can best be prepared to answer those questions when they come from your team. You should be prepared to ask questions around commuting concerns, childcare, care and responsibilities, as well as accessibility, because we have to think that in 2023, some of your colleagues have been remote working potentially full-time for the last 3 years. And some may, you know, if you've had colleagues join within the last 3 years, they may have never worked in your office environment. So those concerns are really valid, and they are going to come up if you're having to have these conversations. So it can be a whole team discussion. It's also important to carve out time to have those individual discussions. So there might be people that aren't prepared to share in a group setting or on a group Teams call, a group Zoom call, why they're not comfortable with that. So making sure that you've got some time there to have those individual conversations, and come prepared with flexible solutions, ideas for compromises, so that you can discuss it with confidence, and so that you can support your team, your colleagues, as well as your senior leadership. So taking that kind of approach will help your employees to feel valued and included in those conversations, particularly if you're considering a change to a policy. So if you're considering that moving back into office-based work, or primarily office-based work, is going to sort of give rise to a change in contracts or a change in your home working policy, you want your colleagues to feel that they were part of that discussion, and not that, you know, we all know that it's not nice to have a new document come through and this is what you do now, when there's been no previous conversation or previous consideration. The bottom line of that one is just being empathetic, being sensitive to people's needs outside of work, and just being honest and communicating openly with your team, and being available for any questions they've got.
I mean, the one of the key things that I think I picked up there from you as well was this notion of it is a give and take. It's a discussion. It's
absolutely
going into that and saying, this is what we're doing, just as it's not for an employee necessarily to say, well, I'm not going to do that.
I'm not doing that. Yeah, absolutely.
About kind of that middle ground, and how much would work for you? What do we need to think about working around? So yeah. Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
This was a bit of a tricky question for me. I kind of felt and feel so, and so sometimes when I get these kind of questions, I fall back. And one great person I find to fall back on is Brené Brown. She has written an enormous amount of books, but in those books is an enormous amount of wisdom. And one thing that stands out for me here is creating clarity is being kind. Not having clarity is being unkind.
Yeah.
Now, in this kind of situation, as you said, 3 years we've been developing a certain habit, and now suddenly we have to reverse that habit. What does that mean? Is public transport still going to be the same? Is how I'm going to pay in the restaurant, is that still going to be the same? Is it going to be the same restaurant for a cafeteria? All of those kind of things at that point can fire at you. You might have hired people during that 3-year period who might have had a hidden disability, or even a not so hidden disability, never shared that with you. They were fine, they were working from home, thank you very much. And then suddenly you land this on them. So there's an element here that definitely, as Katie says, needs to be discussed, and creating that clarity around it. What we had in Microsoft is that in our team, we started to discuss, right, what are the conditions that would work for you? And we started saying things like, well, if you have to go to the office, it has to be worth it. What are we going to get in it for it? Because, you know, not just because the irony is, and we already had that pre-pandemic, you would go to the office, and what would you do in the office? You would find a space, put on your headset, and you would be in Teams meetings the whole day long. I was like, hang on, I can do this at home.
Yeah.
It's like, so we had kind of had to describe what would work, what didn't work, the conditions for success on this. And on that clarity aspect, we did ultimately say there's this kind of, based on what the teams in between themselves have agreed, we have an overall policy which says the aim is 50-50, work from home, work in the office. That's the aim, 50-50. Bearing in mind, you might also be at customer sites, which counts for not be, you know, that you have to manage that factor in there as well. So sometimes I just say, well, you might not see me a whole week in the office because I'm at customers. Yeah. Now, the exceptions for this It's just simple manager agreement, and you discuss this with your manager, and your manager is empowered, and you're empowered to have that discussion. Very simple, no onerous, whatever, sign off, all of that kind of stuff. And for me personally, this is part of a reasonable adjustment that I have, and also the agreement that I have with my manager. I work where work is. And, you know, if that's a presentation, if that's a seminar, if that's a conference, if that's a customer workshop, that'll be where I will be, or be where I can best be myself.
Yeah,
that's fine. So going back to that, and how do I summarize that? Going back to that initial statement, being clear is being kind, and it's about shaping that clarity and that empowerment so we can be our true best selves.
Yeah. No, I think that's, both of you made incredibly kind of great points around that, about the transparency, about not forcing people into it. Yeah, I mean, the only things that I'd kind of come up with from our perspective was around the reasons why you should return. You know, there is that passive aggressive kind of pushback from employees as well at some points, where they'll deliberately aim to be in the office, you know, on a quiet Monday because they want to get work done. They don't want to be disturbed, and it does kind of negate that wanting people put back in. So make it an environment that they'll want to return to. That's fantastic. Thank you. On to the next question, I think. So here's one that's a little bit more, certainly my my field, and definitely Michael's as well. So what technologies or tools do you recommend for supporting disabled employees in a hybrid work model? And I'll go straight to you, Michael. I won't jump in myself on that one, as tempting as it is.
So I think this is an even more exciting question than ever before, but I'm not going to go straight away down here in the list. I'm sorry to disappoint here. First to go, let's go a little bit back here. Disabled people, disabled talent come to work, and that applies wherever that work location is.
Yeah.
Now, if you then step back, so how can we make this work? How can we make this function? So there's a number of things then I think are critical for success here. And that's, first of all, access to a cloud productivity suite. Because the cloud productivity suite can make sure that you're connected wherever you are, that you can collaborate wherever you are. This was important when we were remote, but it's even more important when we were hybrid.
Yeah.
Because you could be collaborating with somebody else somewhere else, but you could be collaborating with the whole team, which is in a whole room somewhere else, and that repeated several times. So London, Paris, all of that kind of stuff. And I mentioned some different places here which are remote. This is also considering then, how can that same technology support you in an asynchronous way as well? So persistence of chat, persistence of sharing, all of that kind of stuff. So
can you just explain for the audience what you mean by asynchronous there?
Asynchronous. So at this point in time, you are here, unless you're watching a recording, you are here with us, you are chatting, you're asking questions. We're not replying them instantly yet, but that will come. You are seeing us here. That's synchronous. But people who can't follow for whatever reason, they might then catch up later on to see this, and they will still be able to benefit from the captions. They will still be able to benefit from the slides, us speaking, and all of that kind of stuff. And depending on different technologies, they can then even dig on further, check out the links which were posted in the chat and things like that. That's asynchronous, but that's also key to hybrid working in that sense. So not only in place, but also in time, so to speak. So a cloud productivity suite, and then even more so, definitely a hybrid, you want this to be secure. You want this to be underpinned by technology which is accessible. That could be your operating system, an accessible operating system. That could be a suite which has accessibility built in. So, because the thing here is, if you then have to work left, right, cafeteria, on as a person, any person really, you want that familiarity as well. You don't want to say, oh, I'm in the office, so now I have to work with something else. Oh, so now I'm in a cafeteria, so now I have to work with this screen reader, or like this. You want to have that familiarity, you want to have that built-in of accessibility. Now, so what I'm talking about is having the same technology or the same experiences everywhere. I've seen situations where disabled employees had better technology at work, but also at home. You know, and that's something that you don't want this now, where we are now in 2023 going hybrid. You don't want this. You want people to be able to be their true best selves everywhere. So yeah. Secure, accessible cloud productivity suite. In our case, that would be Microsoft 365. But let's go a little bit further. For some customers, you could say, well, that's all very well, but from a security perspective, we need to go further. And, you know, that could be your right to, because where you work and all of that kind of stuff. And there might still be a reluctance then to have cloud, to use cloud on that sense. Mm-hmm. Now, a solution from us is here, our Windows 365 Cloud PC experience. So in that sense, that would all be managed by you and your tenants, but you would be streaming the interaction to the user.
Yeah.
Now, this is where you could say, yeah, we got something like this. Ours is a little bit unique, I've seen. In ours, you can have persistence of experience. So let's say, different scenario, I can have a cloud experience on experience and then poof, I switch off. But every time with that technology, you might have to reconfigure. So let's say you're colorblind. Oh, I have to reconfigure the filters again. So before you're productive, you have to reconfigure everything.
Yeah.
With our cloud PC, you don't have to do this. This is still your personal PC, but it's in the cloud, except that you can consume it from any device. This is really key for somebody, because being able to configure technology the way you want to work is a key enabler for people with disabilities, is a key enabler to accessibility.
I think that's a really interesting point, and one of the things that we often talk about in terms of disadvantages that disabled people might face is that actually I want to be able to sit down and start work. I don't want to spend 5 minutes every time I sit back down at a computer setting it up for the way it works for me, because that's how I work my best. And I don't want it to be hitting the kind of targets or the rest of my team, because they've got to all wait for me to get the filters up and to. So yeah, this is a really interesting idea there.
Now there's a next level to this, and this is where it gets really exciting. I'm not going to go too deep in this. Artificial intelligence. You've probably seen lots about it already. We're on a journey. There's still so much to do on accessibility in itself, and even though we have accessibility built in our products, there are still barriers. One of the barriers is findability. The number of times, where is everything? You might not know, your IT might not know. Things change all the time, right? It's cloud. It's, you know, you get new updates. I know. Findability. Now, this is where we're going to get to a new level, where artificial intelligence Copilot will be able, you will be able to converse with Copilot saying, you know what, can you magnify this for me? Or how do I magnify this for me? And Copilot will say, yeah, of course. Here's how you magnify it, or shall I magnify it for you? So we'll be having new experiences thanks to artificial intelligence. That's one thing, creating better user experience via artificial intelligence. Just one thing. The next thing, which is even more exciting, and I love this. Let's say you're into design. You're a really great designer, making something appealing that is you. Or let's say the opposite, completely opposite. Sorry if I offend somebody. You're a numbers person. You know your numbers. If you're a great designer, but you're working in a team and you need to sell something, an idea, you can just say to Copilot, can you get me the numbers to make a compelling business case? And Copilot will do that. And then you can sort that out on how you want it to look.
Yeah.
Boom. The opposite, I'm a numbers person, like, okay, I know my numbers. I need to write a convincing story for my team to change this, to initiate this project. So give the numbers to Copilot. Copilot, can you make this compelling and make it look pretty? And by the way, also create a PowerPoint presentation and maybe make it a little bit fun, because, you know, I want to really engage my team. boom, Copilot will do this. So what we're seeing here is that artificial intelligence will remove barriers to be your true best self. I see humongous opportunity in there for not only for people with disabilities, cognitive learning disabilities, but also everybody here to really just focus on what they're good at, and the rest, let artificial intelligence do the rest. So there you are. I'm going to shut up now on this.
Well, I was going to say, so long as you can give it Scarlett Johansson's voice, then I'm sold.
Maybe.
So just to cover that one off myself, I think portable and universal are key. Obviously, the Microsoft solution to that is a fantastic way of doing that. But yeah, making sure that you're not disadvantaged in one environment, so that you can replicate as close as possible your setup and everything as quickly as possible. That gives you that flexibility to work in the office, to work at home, to work anywhere you want. We would typically, you know, the stuff that we've done previously with things like DSAs and workplace adjustments, we are a charity that would normally look for the inbuilt solutions first, to give people that initial, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to recognize what this product is in front of me and know how to access accessibility features. That's not to say that specialist software isn't important, it's vital, but to be able to get somebody productive from the moment they sit down in front of a screen is key. And also for things like transitions into the workplace. So disabled students transitioning from year to year, or from people transitioning from university into the workplace, making sure that they're familiar with the tools, or at least how to get to those basic support tools within a product itself. And then the other thing that I was just going to bring up was being thoughtful with the collaborative tools. So I'm a complete tech geek. Put something flashy in front of me, put a whiteboard that's got stickers and emojis and everything, and I will go to town and find every single kind of whizzy bit. But do be thoughtful of people for whom that isn't going to be a shared experience. It's not to say don't use it, but think about those people, think about how you might include them and how you might mitigate against some of the flashiness that isn't maybe quite so vital for what you're doing. So, Katie, did you have any thoughts on the tech stuff?
The only thing that I was going to add, I mean, I've been making notes for myself during that discussion. It's absolutely fantastic. So thanks so much for sharing, both of you, because that's really, really good. The only thing I was going to share from somebody who is not naturally sort of tech-minded, something that we found that works really well in terms of collaborative working is having access to a network where you can talk about what you're using, what's working, what isn't working, and share best practice with other people across other companies that are doing your role, that are putting tech adjustments in place for their own colleagues, their own employees. So for example, at BDF, we have the technology task force. So if you're a BDF partner, you'll automatically have access to that. If you're a BDF member, you can access that sort of on request. And that's a sort of, they meet every couple of months. They have speakers come in that talk about all things sort of accessible tech. And it's a chance for people to network, get to know people, get connected with people. We can put you in touch with people that will be able to help as you kind of develop that, because tech isn't something, like you say, that comes naturally to everybody or to every company. So if you have the opportunity to network with people, make sure you're discussing tech with them, because it's fast moving, it's changing. There's so much amazing stuff out there that you want to make sure that you're sharing best practice, as well as sort of gaining some knowledge yourself around it. So that's the only thing I'd add. But thanks so much for that. That was super interesting.
Yeah, and we will share the contact details for the BDF for people to...
Oh, sure. Yeah. Any questions, of course.
Fantastic. Right, so the next question, I think, if we're okay for time. So how are your organizations managing and supporting its employees' needs at home and in the office? So I'm going to just venture a very quick answer on this one. So we've always run elements of the charity as hybrid. So I'm home-based. I have colleagues who are home-based. We have regular check-ins with team members, and we have ways of communicating changes to our circumstances. We also do try and practice what we preach in terms of hybrid working and training. And so we do kind of build on established working practices. So a little tip for anybody just in terms of hybrid working is if you're having a meeting, then prioritize those who are joining online. That's going to be a much better kind of general experience for everybody. If you're thinking online first, people in the room second, flipping it the other way around, you do tend to start running into barriers. Just going to go very quickly to Michael on that one now.
Okay, thank you. I find it an interesting question because when I joined Microsoft 20 years ago, how technology secure working practices and the ecosystem around that, for example, how you get support on if something wouldn't work, or if I need to update my operating system or install some new software, all of that was already there and I could do this from home. So if you can't do this now, where have you been? I could say, but that's not very nice saying that, isn't it? But I guess maybe key to emphasize is that there's an element here of culture. And I'm going to give you a real life situation here. A little while back, we had a non-disabled employee and she got bitten by a spider. Now, spiders, okay. This caused, however, for that person a severe immunological reaction, which required treatment, and the acquired condition that treatment itself had impact on how and when the employee could work. Now, the employee wanted to work. And so we had to find something that would work anywhere, anytime. So at home, the employee was provided an ergonomic chair, and on top of our technology, extra assistive technology. For example, she had a head mouse, a foot mouse, and a regular mouse, because at any given time, the employee wasn't sure what would work. And, you know, that in itself, that is, you know, what are the barriers that could potentially hinder the person to work, to be their true best selves, to excel?
Yeah.
And how do you mitigate that? And ultimately, it was looking at what can we do rather than what can't we do. And
Yeah.
I think that is a mindset definitely that I would attach to that question.
Yeah.
To empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more, then you need to have that culture.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if it's more of how do we manage when they're away and we're not sure, are they really working? Are they really engaged? There, I would refer to our employee experience platform, Viva, where you can see how people are working. Are they working too much? Are they at risk of burning out?
Yeah.
Are they engaged? Is their workload too much? Has there been a long time before I checked in with that employee? Viva, that employee experience platform, will give you all kinds of indicators to a manager to make sure that they keep in touch and to make sure that they also track how the employee is feeling. And this is all done on an anonymous, privacy respecting basis.
Yeah.
So you don't get the names and things like that. It's just like, oh, it looks like the feeling in your team is a bit like they're overwhelmed, overloaded, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Very much a very useful light touch temperature check. Katie, over to you.
Just in terms of what we're doing in terms of supporting our employees, one of the most important things that our leadership does is keeps their sort of communication channels open and make sure that they're present online and available online for remote working colleagues, but also that they're in the office and they're attending events and they're available if we need them for anything. We have our formal team meetings, which, like you said, are set up for remote first and then in the room second, which is wonderful. So we're making sure that all our sessions are accessible internally for colleagues wherever they are. We've also recently implemented water cooler sessions. So we have sort of an hour blocked out if we don't have a formal team meeting, just where you can dip in and out, chat with your colleagues, recommend something that you've read or something that you've watched, just see how people are, see how people's weekends are. It's a nice opportunity to have a bit of a chat with people. So yeah, and making sure that people have got what they need and making sure that people feel sort of comfortable to come to their manager and say, you know, I'm really enjoying being at home, but I'm actually struggling with this particular thing. Can you put this in place for me? And just keeping that. I mean, we're lucky that we're a fairly small organization, so we have that really kind of close feel anyway, even when we're not in the office, that it's quite easy to kind of hop online and chat to people. But yeah, I think what we're personally doing really well is we know that our managers are around, whether they're in the office or whether they're home working, they're there at the end of the phone or at the end of the corridor to have a chat with. So that's been really, yeah, it's been really great. It's been a really great experience as a remote worker, to know that you can meet them, but you can also chat to them when you need them.
Fantastic. And I think sticking with you, Katie, because we're going to
Sure.
go to the next question now, which is probably going to be our last until we go over to the Q&A section for the audience. I've seen some questions coming in, looking forward to getting to grips with those. But the question is, how can organizations foster a culture of inclusivity for disabled employees in a hybrid work setting?
Excellent. I've got a lot to say on this. I'll try and whiz through it. So the first sort of point I wanted to make is that that culture of inclusivity isn't something that's unique to office-based work. It isn't something that's unique to sort of non-hybrid working, and once people are at home, you lose that. It's important to still ensure that your disabled colleagues, all your colleagues, are happy, safe, thriving in those hybrid settings, work from home settings, and when they're in the office. So something that BDF's done recently is the Great Big Workplace Adjustment Survey. So we surveyed over 500 members of leadership teams, upper management, and over 1,500 employees from across all sectors, just asking about what their experiences were of being disabled in the workplace and of getting the adjustments that they need. And one figure that was lower than we would have liked to see, and I think lower than anybody would like to see, is that only 37% of disabled employees feel that their employer is genuine about removing disability related barriers and genuinely making the workplace inclusive for disabled colleagues.
Wow.
We also know that 56% of disabled employees said that there are still disability related barriers in the workplace after those adjustments have been made. So it's really important, and I think we touched on it earlier, that remembering that putting those adjustments in place to make hybrid working easier is the starting point. It's not the solution. So putting, we talked about it briefly before we all got on the call, that it has to be, you know, the tech has to be there, the accessibility has to be there, the policies have to be there, the culture has to be there, the belonging has to be there, or the whole thing isn't going to be accessible. In working towards sort of true inclusion and true belonging, we need to keep discussions open. We need to keep on top of best practice. We need to keep on top of developments in tech and also in sort of physical accessibility options to make sure that we can get it right for people. To try and increase that 37% that we mentioned, we should be ensuring that colleagues have got equitable access to meetings, events, training, everything that goes on. And what's unique about hybrid working is, like we said earlier, we have to make sure that that experience is the same, whether someone's in the office or whether they're at home. So you don't want hybrid workers to dread coming into the office because they don't have what they need. We also don't want people that are maybe working really successfully at home to feel like they have to come into the office because what's now been put in place at the office is actually better than they've got at home. So they're then dealing with the commute, they're dealing with childcare, they're dealing with exhaustion, because they're coming into the office because what's there is better for them. So it's trying to make sure that that consistency continues, whether you're at home or whether you're in the workplace. We should be thinking accessibility first rather than trying to go back and sort of retrospectively change things or wait for there to be a problem before we put something in place. So when you think accessibility first, for example, when you're creating accessible comms, start making that document with accessibility in mind, and you don't have to spend days editing it afterwards because it's not accessible for everyone. We know also from the survey that 78% of disabled employees told us that they, rather than their employer, had to initiate the process of getting adjustments. So being proactive in that area as a company is paramount, and having a really clear process as to how you get that done is also really important. My second point would be, whilst working from home maybe and is often an accessibility need for some disabled colleagues. For others, coming into the office is their accommodation. It's what they need. For particularly, we do see reports of sort of social isolation for disabled colleagues when they're entirely home based. So with hybrid working as an option, with the right adjustments in place, that's the solution to offering true inclusion. Only 10% of disabled employees said it was easy to get the adjustments they needed. So like I said a minute ago, making sure you've got a really clear process for how those adjustments are obtained, how they're paid for, who you ask, who they ask, and making that process as efficient and as effective and as timely as possible, and making it easy to navigate for your employer and for your manager who's then trying to put that in place. When we discuss tech, it can be a bit of a tricky area, because if you don't deal with it every day, you don't always know what's available. So trying to keep on top of that, trying to, like I mentioned earlier, collaborative approaches, discussing best practice, making sure you know what's available, and then listening to your employee. So you might say, oh yeah, you're coming to me with this adjustment, you need this, I can get this for you, and actually waiting and listening to what they're saying, because it might not be that that's what they need. So it's finding that balance between educating yourself about what's out there and keeping on top of that, but also making sure that, at the end of the day, our disabled colleagues are the experts in their own condition. They know what's going to work for them. They might not know the name of it. They might not know exactly what the tech is. And that's where you can come in and support with that. The last kind of point that I was going to make on fostering that culture of inclusivity is making sure that you're encouraging feedback. So having like employee action groups and things like that for your disabled colleagues is great for those that want to be involved. Recognize that it can take a great deal of emotional labor to advocate for yourself and for others. So making sure that you're creating those kind of safer spaces for your colleagues to share about what is working and what isn't working. It's really important to remember that we're all navigating this like new normal together. So you're not expected to be perfect. And as a manager, as a senior leader, as a CEO, you're not expected to know everything and get everything right immediately and first time. And it's very easy for us that talk about it every day to be like, oh, well, you just need this. But we recognize that that's not realistic. And your colleagues recognize that as well. So being open to receiving sort of what might be constructive criticism or feedback and making those changes is really important, because like I said, we're all still navigating this together. We're still in that period of flex, that period of change, that there isn't a solution. There isn't a one size fits all. The last thing I would say is to make a very brief point about intersectionality when it comes to workplace culture. So you have to show that you are valuing, promoting, empowering your colleagues from all of your DEI measures. We know that disabled colleagues don't feel as safe to share disability. They don't feel as safe to ask for what they need if there is an environment where you're not hitting your other DEI parameters. So you need to be making sure that you're letting your colleagues see you getting it right for everybody. And that's how you kind of nurture that culture of people feeling comfortable to come to you and either disclose the disability that they might not have disclosed before because they were home-based and they didn't need to, and now they're coming back into the office so they do. And to ask for what they need and ask for what's to be put in place. So making sure you're hitting your DEI measures across the board is how you can ensure that kind of true inclusion, true belonging for your disabled colleagues as well as everybody else. So thank you for letting me talk. Lots to say on that one.
I felt that, yeah, you could have the floor because Michael and I have geeked out a little bit. So.
Right. No, when it comes to inclusive culture, that's my bag, that one.
So on that note, I think we can go over to questions now. Kelly, if you've got any questions that people have sent through. I would also say the PDF report is available on the website, isn't it now? And it's
it is, yeah.
It's a really interesting read. I'd encourage everybody to have a look.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks so much to you all. We have a bit of time to answer some of the audience questions. So I thought a brilliant question, and it says it's for Adam, but I think it's Adam and Katie. As I say that, the question It's disappeared from my screen. Oh, here it is. And I think everyone will be really interested to know, on quite a basic level, what are the expectations on an employer with regards to equipment from when working from home?
Just read the rest of that one.
You want to take that one, Adam?
Sorry, did you ask me if I wanted to, or are you saying that you want to do that? Sorry, Katie.
Yeah, no, I was saying, would you like to sort of start with that one? Because I
I
have an idea, but I'll let you start with that one. I think you're probably more of the expert in that than me.
I was just reading the rest of the quote. It's quite a long question.
Okay, fab. Yeah, I'll bring it up.
Yeah. What are the expectations of employee with regards to equipment when working from home? I suppose it is about, I think it's for me, just kind of in summary, it's about reasonable accommodations for an employee at home. You're not expected to, as an employer, provide a complete suite of everything that somebody possibly could dream of. But it's about a conversation with that employee to say, look, you've invested in an employee. You obviously want them to work at their best. So it is that, what do you need to get this job done to the degree at which I employed you for? And if that is a big screen, that's a big screen. If it's an ergonomic mouse, if it's a disability adjustment, then absolutely that's a complete no-brainer. But if there are elements at which you think actually that's a little bit above and beyond, you do just have to make that kind of assessment as to, well, you know, I've invested in you, I pay you a salary, and I expect you to earn that salary. So if I'm going to restrict you in some way, or if I'm going to make you excel, then that's down to me. And yeah, a lot of the adjustments, a lot of the accommodations are very low cost, most of which are free. And certainly, you know, as I say, for the workplace assessments that we do, again, we will always look at the most kind of inbuilt options first, and then look at, right, well, if you're comfortable with that, then we can look at expanding that. That's when you can have a sensible conversation with the employee to say, yeah, I've used Narrator on Windows. It was okay. It got me to this point, but now I do need something very specific. So I'm going to have to look at something like JAWS, you know, but you get that ammunition to go to an employer and say, look, I need specialist software, not just I want it all because, you know, I've got this assessment, and it's now going to be a Christmas list sort of thing. So yeah, it's having that conversation.
Something I'd add as well is that we've learned recently from we held our annual conference last month, and there was lots of speakers that came on to talk about that. And one of the things that really stuck with me was the average cost of putting an adjustment in place is around 7% of the cost of replacing that employee. And if you don't put these adjustments in place, you'll lose them, and you'll lose the talent, because there are companies that are putting those adjustments in place. And like Adam said, reasonable is a word that we talk about a lot, because obviously different people have different ideas about what's reasonable in the workplace. But if you can identify a key need and you know what you need, it's important to remember that the cost of putting that in place is far, far, far lower in almost all circumstances than the cost of having to rehire for that position.
Yeah.
Amazing, thank you both. Sarah asks, can you share more about what you mean when you say to prioritize online attendees during hybrid meetings? What specific practices do you find work? And I think this is just very relevant, just as we said, with hybrid working, online meetings are just going to be a key thing in that. Michael, did you want to weigh in here?
Well, I mean, very quickly to get the technology out of the way, there's the technology, obviously, if you have emojis, access to emojis, access to hand raising, all of that kind of stuff, and then encourage those practices, that can help a lot. Also want to quickly add something, which is, if you don't have it yet, that will come, but what I like as well is something called in Teams, which is called Intelligent Recap, which also will help by not necessarily being in the room, but not necessarily being able to fully participate. You will get a full recap of what was said during the meeting and by whom, the actions, all of that kind of stuff. And you will get emotion analysis as well, as in, you know, was there humor in this? Was there how was the mood of the room? What were more serious aspects? All of that you will get in there as well. But going back to there as well, it's, you know, it's sometimes a bit about good practice, right? Hey, Bob, looks like you've been quiet. Just want to make sure, did you get the opportunity to say everything that you wanted to say? It's also a bit like that. And, you know, in real life, you might want to be that inclusive. Well, that still holds true for that mixed hybrid situation.
Yeah. I think a tip that we often give out in the training that we do is about having key roles for people online. So having a moderator, having somebody monitoring questions online that makes sure that the person in that role or the people online don't get ignored or kind of passed over, that there is a very clear voice there. Yeah.
And it can also be the very basic things, making sure everybody online can see what's going on in the room. You know, if you've got somebody stood up talking, making sure that your camera for the remote access is positioned correctly, making sure the background noise isn't too much for people that are attending remotely, making sure you've got your captions, making sure people are okay with meetings being recorded so that you can watch them back afterwards, having transcripts available. And like Michael just said, that tech with sort of emotion analysis sounds absolutely wonderful. I'm so excited about these tech changes. That sounds great.
It's interesting what you were saying about people in the making sure that you can see the room. It's also quite useful to label a camera as such, because there was a case the other day where I joined what I thought was going to be an online meeting, because I was meeting a group of people who I knew were in a different location, but it came up as one person's name. And so I waited and waited to see if anybody else would join the webinar. And in the end, it just got, you know, it's a couple of minutes past and it was just getting a little bit awkward. And so I joined, I invited them into the room. It was Teams. And suddenly this camera went on and David, whoever it was, or whatever the name was, suddenly became a room full of people. And I was thrust into this where I expected a single person and an apology for nobody turning up. And I was suddenly thrown into this,
Yeah. I had it the other way around with where I attended an in-person training session, and the room had a huge screen on it with lots of different faces that were attending remotely and ourselves magnified while we were giving this presentation. So it's interesting, but it's great to see how it can work both ways in that respect.
Amazing, thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for audience Q&A. Any unanswered questions we hope to answer online in the next few days, and you'll receive an email with a link to access them. So just if Freya could bring up the slides again, thank you so much. Finally, just a bit more information that might be of interest to you. Our expert workplace consultants, such as Adam, can help you look at your ways of working in our disability inclusion gap analysis service, which can include the hybrid working model your organisation has set in place. You can talk to us more by setting up a consultation at www.abilitynet.org.uk/gap-analysis. We also offer accessibility and workplace training, so you and your teams can build your skills and capability. Our webinar attendees can also use our 10% discount code AbilityNet Webinar 10. Next slide, please, Freya. Keep in touch with us by visiting our website at abilitynet.org.uk. You can find lots of helpful information and resources, including our new podcast series on disability inclusion that went live today. Adam hosts the podcast with our colleague Lizzie, and their first interview is with Maria Zeder from High Speed 2. You'll receive an email on Thursday with a recording to this webinar and links to those other resources. Please also sign up to our e-newsletter at abilitynet.org.uk/newsletter. So you can get more news on our next webinars. Don't miss on Tuesday, 12th September, top tips for boosting your digital skills with BT Group and Age UK. So just thank you so much again, Katie, Michael and Adam, and everyone who's joined us. Please do complete the feedback form that you'll be directed to, and we'll be in touch very soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you again.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Kelly.